So, welcome back to today's episode. Today we cover the next tree in the tree series, which is the, in German, Hainbuche. So in English this would translate to hornbeam. And yeah, let's just dive right in. As always, subscribe if you want to, like if you want to, and yeah, let's start. So, das Blatt der Hainbuche weist im Gegensatz zur Rotbuche einen gesägten und keinen glatten Blattrand auf. Das Blatt, the leaf, can also relate to a piece of paper, or rather paper sheet in English, or for example a saw, what's it called, saw blade, I don't know, Sägeblatt. Here you see the Blatt, which means blade. And yeah, der Hainbuche, of the, can also be the male nominative form, but this is genitive. Hainbuche, hornbeam, not to be confused with Buche in general, which is beech, I believe. Sorry. Buche. Beech. But in this case, this is also gonna get into that topic a bit, but this is not related to the beech at all, but, or maybe a bit, but it's not related to the beech in general. So, weist comes from the word weisen, which means to show, to kind of like have appear, like to show. Im Gegensatz, in contrary, Gegensatz, we had that also in some previous episode. In dem, so im means in dem, equal to in dem. And Gegensatz, so gegen, in general means always against. So, against or opposite. Satz means sentence in general, can also mean like a, what's it called, rack of something, or I don't know, maybe even steak with ake, like ein Satz, for example. I mean, you wouldn't necessarily say that, but I hope you get what I mean. If I say ein Satz, yeah, maybe, for example, Metallplatten, which means metal plates, so a set basically. And this is rather in terms of things, for example, or mostly used in terms of things for construction and stuff like that. So, Gegensatz means in contrary, zur Rotbuche, to the, zu der, so always equals zu der, and der in this case is the feminine form of the accusative dem, so the, not accusative, dative form, so feminine dative. Die Rotbuche, der Rotbuche, zu der Rotbuche, zur Rotbuche, einen gesägten, a gesägten, here we again have the word Säge, which I also showed like a minute ago. So, gesägt derives from the word Säge, or sägen, Säge is the noun, and sägen is the verb, and sägen with a capital S is the plural form of Säge, so saw, or saws in this case. And gesägt, so means I don't know what's called, sewn something, sawed, gesägt, sewn. You probably can't hear it because of some recording stuff, but it just said sawn, so sawn. And keinen, no, glatten, this means like flat, not necessarily flat, like smooth, I would say. Glatt. So yeah, plain or smooth. This is what we meant. Plain is like more in terms of flat, so platt. But glatt can also mean, like in this case, rather smooth. And yeah, Blattrand, which means leaf. Blatt means leaf, we had that. Rand means edge, I think. Rand. Yeah, edge or border. And this just means you could say edge of the leaf, so these, yeah. Let me just translate that, maybe there's another word. Yeah, leaf edge. So the leaf edge here, which you can see is kind of like a saw, so in German we say gesägt, as it's written here, to kind of describe it as being like a saw, so the saw blade, you could say, because it's also German we say gezackt, jagged, I believe, or jagged, and it's kind of similar to that. So, das Blatt der Hainbuche weist im Gegensatz zur Rotbuche einen gesägten und keinen glatten Blattrand auf. So, auf means on, but this still, what's it called? Belongs to the verb, so this is a split verb, kind of, you could say. So, in German we say Trennverb. You can Google that if you want to know more about that. Separating verb, I don't know if that's correct, but because we have a prefix, aufweisen, and in this case it's split. You can't say es aufweist dies und das. Es aufweist dies und das. This is not correct. I mean, you would understand it, but this is just not correct. You have to say es weist dies und das auf. So, here you see it has this and that. This is what I meant. It's not necessarily to show, but rather to like show up in something, but not passively. I mean, or rather passively. No, not this is passively. It's rather to show or be shown. I don't know. It's kind of passive. But this is, I think the reason why it said show here is because weisen in general, to like in the active form, aufweisen is rather passive. So weisen in general is can also be den Weg weisen, which would be probably the most famous example, which means to show the way, and here we have the verb show. So, das Blatt der Hainbuche weist im Gegensatz zur Rotbuche einen gesägten und keinen glatten Blattrand auf. The leaf of the hornbeam, what's it called, shows, I don't know, in contrary to the, what was it again? In German it's Rotbuche, so kind of red beech, but European beech, it doesn't show it shows a jagged, a sawn rather, or jagged, and no smooth leaf edge. So, die Hainbuche. Let's get into the main article. Die Hainbuche, the hornbeam. Die Hainbuche, or the hornbeam tree, I don't know. Die Hainbuche hat einen irreführenden Namen. Sie ist nicht näher mit der Rotbuche verwandt, sondern eher mit der Birke und der Haselnuss. Ökologisch nimmt sie aber eine ähnliche Stellung ein wie die Buche. Sie verträgt relativ viel Schatten, wodurch sie konkurrenzstark gegenüber anderen Baumarten ist. Weil sie aber nicht ganz so hoch wächst wie die Rotbuche und auch nicht ganz so viel Schatten verträgt, ist die Rotbuche die dominantere Baumart von beiden. Vor allem auf trockenen, aber nährstoffreichen Böden sowie im subkontinentalen Klima des äußersten Osten Deutschlands, wo die Rotbuche an ihre Grenzen kommt, spielt die Hainbuche in natürlichen Wäldern eine wichtige Rolle. Für das schwere und harte Holz der Hainbuche existiert kein großer Markt, weshalb sie wirtschaftlich weniger interessant ist als die Rotbuche. Anwendungen findet sie aber zum Beispiel im Werkzeugbau und als Brennholz. Nicht zu verachten ist ihre Eigenschaft als dienende Baumart. So trägt die Hainbuche als prägende Baumart im Unterstand entscheidend zur Astreinigung der darüberliegenden Bäume und zur Bodenverbesserung bei. So that was the whole text read out loud, and now let's translate it like sentence by sentence and word by word. Die Hainbuche, the hornbeam, hat, by the way, Hain is a kind of old word to describe, I think, some like field, Hain, think it's grove. What does grove mean? I think, yeah, Funny, I just want to know the translation. Just gonna Google it. So, Ansammlung von Bäumen, Baumallees. So this means basically a collection of trees, or not collection, do you say alley? I don't know, but many trees standing together. A group of trees, a tree-lined avenue. Yeah, avenue maybe rather. So, die Hainbuche, the hornbeam, has einen irreführenden Namen. Irre means how do I like describe it or explain the irre? But this is not really a noun. Maybe it's rather an adjective. So you could say mad or insane or crazy or funky. Also mind-blowing. For example, when I say das ist ja irre, which is a very common expression. Das ist ja irre. You'd say that's insane can either be used in context for very crazy situations negatively, or in terms of like, I can't believe that this is real, positively, or also negatively. So, hat einen irreführenden Namen, irreführend, irre, so crazy, mad. But also, in this case, I would rather explain it as, you could say nowhere, or, yeah, I would just leave it at nowhere, because führend derives from the word führen, which is a verb, and it means to lead, or guide, or, yeah, carry. And this just means to basically lead somebody nowhere, so, or wrongly. Irre can also mean just wrong, somewhere wrong, you could say. Irreführen, so somewhere wrong, leading, or you could say misleading is just, maybe that would have just been easier to translate it this way, but irre is also a known word, so I think this was quite, like, this was worth translating, even though you could have just said misleading. So, misleading name, Namen means just name. So the hornbeam has a misleading name. Sie ist nicht näher mit der Rotbuche verwandt, sondern eher mit der Birke und der Haselnuss. Sie, she, in this case in English you would say it, ist, is, nicht, not, näher, closer. This derives from the word nah. And the comparative form, so the higher form you could say, or second highest, I don't know. Comparative form is näher, nah, näher, am nächsten. Am nächsten? Yeah, am nächsten. I was just kind of confused. So, nah, näher, was it am nächsten? I'm just confused right now. Am nächsten? Am nächsten? Am nächsten? I'm just confused right now, but I think this should be correct if Google Translate like already recognizes it that way. I hope. Nahe, näher, am nächsten, because there's also, which is kind of, when you talk, sometimes people will say am nächsten. I think there are like very messed up forms due to colloquial language, you could say. So am nächsten, I think some people say, even though it's probably am nächsten, I'm not quite sure. Am nächsten. Is it nächsten? I'm just gonna have to ask. Steigerungsformen. Am nächsten. Oh, so that was actually correct and that is incorrect. So this tool was correct in correcting me, basically. So, näher, am nächsten. I was just so confused, like, because when you say it and just talk, it's always easier to just say something and it makes sense. I could even say am nächsten and people would understand it, but when you really think about it, you kind of get confused sometimes, or for me a lot of times, because I have to explain it, because I don't really think about it a lot, but when I explain it, I just get confused. And so näher, am nächsten is the correct way of saying it, you could say. And this is incorrect, but what I just wanted to say is that you could say am nächsten. You could probably even say am nahesten, even though that sounds weird to me, but I don't know. Just, yeah. So am nächsten is correct, but yeah. So where were we? Näher. Yeah, this is what I wanted to say. This is the comparative, so in German, Komparativ form, which is the second highest or the middle form. I don't know, whatever you want to call it. And so closer. Sie ist nicht näher, she is not closer, or it is not closer, mit der Rotbuche verwandt, with the European beech, verwandt, which means, I don't necessarily verwandt, well, just, yeah, wenden probably somewhere, but that does not make a lot of sense, which means to turn around. So, I know, it does actually make a lot of sense, like, figuratively, because you're kind of turned and twisted into each other. I hope this makes sense. But in terms of family relations, so it is not closer or closely, I don't know, related, or it does not have closer relations with the European beech, so being related, I guess. So it is not closer. Do you say being related in English? I'm just going to translate that sentence, because I don't know to say that exactly in English. Closely. So it is not closely related to the European beech. Sie ist nicht näher mit der Rotbuche verwandt, sondern, in English you would probably just say but, eher, rather, with der Birke, the birch, I think, if I'm not mistaken. Birkenstock, of course, which is a German brand, I believe. Und der Haselnuss and the hazelnut. Nuss always means nut, and Hase means hazel. So, the hornbeam has a misleading name. It is not closely related to the European beech, but rather to the birch and the hazelnut. Ökologisch nimmt sie aber eine ähnliche Stellung ein wie die Buche. This means ecologically, nimmt, takes, this derives from the word nehmen, which kind of takes up a different or weird form when you conjugate it. Ich, at least for the, what was it, third form singular or something, because ich nehme still kind of normal. And then it kind of gets weird, du nimmst, because this is not necessarily too related, but I guess this just evolved over time with speaking. Nehme, du nimmst would be, I mean, this is in German nowadays incorrect, but probably kind of it turned into du nimmst, I don't know. So, ökologisch nimmt, takes, sie, she, in this case it, because English is just that way, aber, but, or rather though, eine, a, ähnliche, similar, ähnlich, maybe derives from the word, not maybe, but maybe to explain it. Ähnliche derives from the word ähneln, which means resemble, and I think, thinking about it, it probably derives from the word ahne, which means ancestor or forefather. So, ähnliche, similar, Stellung, position, derives from the word stellen, place, put, set, or also Stelle, also place, position, yeah. Position, ein, nimmt ein, derives from the word, or this is also a split verb, so einnehmen, to take or take in, or occupy rather. In this case, wie die Buche, like the beech. Ökologisch nimmt sie aber eine ähnliche Stellung ein wie die Buche. Ecologically takes she or it rather, no, but a similar position in like the beach, so ecologically takes she, but although takes she though a similar position in like the beach, so ecologically although ecologically it does occupy a different position, or not a different, a similar position like the beach, ecologically speaking. Sie verträgt relativ viel Schatten, wodurch sie konkurrenzstark gegenüber anderen Baumarten ist. Sie verträgt relativ viel Schatten. Sie, she, or it, verträgt. Also had that in some previous episode where I had like a long explanation. This derives from the word tragen, which means to take or to carry rather. Vertragen means to be able to take, so to bear or to, I don't know, bear, tolerate. Yeah, rather tolerate. So she tolerates, sie verträgt, or it tolerates relatively, viel, much, or many, Schatten, shadow, plural form of that is also Schatten. So it tolerates relatively much shadow, or darkness rather in English you could say. Wodurch, which means where, through, but this just means, what's the translation? Wodurch, with which, or through which you could say, by which maybe, through which. So kind of like switched order, but wo turns to welche, welcher, welches. So in German you would say where, which. In English you would say through which. Sorry, not reversed order, sorry. So where, which, she or it, konkurrenzstark. So that means, Konkurrenz means competition, I think, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. So competition, stark means strong. So strongly being able to compete, you could say, konkurrenzstark. Highly competitive, yeah. This is maybe the more correct translation. Through which she or it, highly competitive, gegenüber, against, over, word by word, but this means, how do I say this, gegenüber, let me just translate that, towards, highly competitive, yeah, rather towards in this case, anderen, different or other, Baumarten, tree, species, ist. So, she, it, verträgt, tolerates, relatively, viel, much, Schatten, shadow, wodurch, through which, sie, she or it, konkurrenzstark, highly competitive, gegenüber, towards, anderen, other, Baumarten, tree species, is. So, it tolerates relatively much darkness, or like relatively a lot of darkness, through which it is very highly competitive towards other tree species. Weil sie aber nicht ganz so hoch wächst wie die Rotbuche und auch nicht ganz so viel Schatten verträgt, ist die Rotbuche die dominantere Baumart von beiden. Because she or it, aber, but, in this case, though, maybe, nicht, not, ganz, completely, or entirely, or whole, you could also say, so, hoch, high, wächst, in this case, it means grow, can also mean to wax something, like wachsen, like for example, I mean, this is a bad example because this also can have this meaning, but sich die Beine. This is also still translated incorrectly, but it would mean to wax mit waxen maybe. Waxing your legs, basically. And, but in general, waxen does not have to do with wax, but rather it has to do with growing. So wächst in this case means grows. Wie die Rotbuche, like the European beech, and auch, also, nicht, not, ganz, completely, entirely, whole, so, viel, much, many, Schatten, shadow, verträgt, tolerates, ist, die, the, Rotbuche, European beech, die, the, dominantere, more dominant, Baumart, tree species, von, of, beiden, both. So, that was relatively clean. Weil sie aber nicht ganz so hoch wächst wie die Rotbuche und auch nicht ganz so viel Schatten verträgt, ist die Rotbuche die dominantere Baumart von beiden. As she or it does not grow as high as the European beech and does not tolerate as much shadow or darkness, the European beech is the European beech is the more dominant of the both. I hope the sentence structure made sense. So, vor allem auf trockenen, aber nährstoffreichen Böden sowie im subkontinentalen Klima des äußersten Osten Deutschlands, wo die Rotbuche an ihre Grenzen kommt, spielt die Hainbuche in natürlichen Wäldern eine wichtige Rolle. Vor allem, this is kind of more of a saying, vor allem means mainly, or how do I translate that? Above all, maybe it's not so much of a saying because it can be translated relatively directly into English, but above is not the same as vor, so it's kind of a saying. Vor allem means basically before all, so basically it means the main thing is kind of, above all. Auf trockenen, on, dry, trocken means dry, trockenen is the plural form, on dry, aber, but, nährstoffreichen, Nährstoff, if we dissect the Jerusalem word nähren, which means to nourish or nurture, or you can also, this is a kind of different form because it's the noun, but relate to the word Nahrung, which means food, or not necessarily nutrition, but nourishment, diet. And nährstoffreichen, so this means nutrition or nourishment. Nährstoff means like substance, or Nährstoff in general means Nährstoff, I forgot the translation. Nutrient, so nutrient, reich means rich, can also as a noun mean an empire, I think, or kingdom. So nutrient rich, Böden is the plural form of Boden, which means floor, and Böden is the plural form, so soils or floors, you could say. Sowie, same as. Sowie means so, like, so basically same as, I think, or same as much as well as also. Im subkontinentalen Klima, in dem, in the subkontinentalen Klima, subcontinental climate, you could say, I think. Subkontinentales Klima. Subcontinental climate, should be correct. It corrects the not uppercase spelling, because this is a very typical error in German that a lot of people make, which in other languages does not exist, but in German it's not necessarily very important because people still understand you, but in some cases it's pretty important, and even Google does not care about it that much, so yeah. Des äußersten Ostens Deutschlands, of the most, what's it called, the outer, I don't know, äußersten, yeah, most extreme, I don't know, the äußersten und Osten Deutschlands, so east of Germany basically. Osten means east, Deutschland's Germany, far east of Germany, so of the far east of Germany, wo die Rotbuche, where the European beach an ihre Grenzen kommt, on or at ihre, her, borders, Grenze means borders, also there's this word, which is a verb, Grenzen, which means to, I think, border something, an etwas Grenzen, bordering on something, yeah, so to border something, or on something. And an ihre Grenzen kommt, at her borders comes, basically. Spielt die Hainbuche in natürlichen Wäldern eine wichtige Rolle? Spielt, plays, the Hainbuche, hornbeam, in natürlichen, natural, or original, but rather natural, Wäldern, forests, a wichtige, important, feminine form, Rolle, because Rolle is feminine, die Rolle. So, above all, on dry but nutrient-rich floors or soils rather, as well as in the subcontinental climate of the far east of Germany, where the European beach at her borders comes, plays the hornbeam in natural forests or an important role. So, above all, on dry but nutrient-rich floors, rather soils, as well as in the subcontinental climate of the far east of Germany, where the red beach, how do I say that? Where the red beach, European beach, an ihre Grenzen kommt. I don't know how to translate that, like, correctly. Yeah, where the European beach reaches its limits, the hornbeam plays in natural forest an important role. So, last paragraph. Für das schwere und harte Holz der Hainbuche existiert kein großer Markt, weshalb sie wirtschaftlich weniger interessant ist als die Rotbuche. For, das, the, neutral form, schwere, because of wood, Holz means wood, so because of Holz rather, das Holz. Für das schwere, for the heavy, und harte, and hard, Holz means wood, der Hainbuche, of the hornbeam, existiert, exists, kein, no, can also mean none, but in this case no, großer, huge or big, Markt, market, or yeah, I think in general market, can also mean like business. In this case, it rather means kind of more of the business side, but Markt can also mean market in terms of selling food on the street, if you know what I mean. So, exists no big market, you could say. Weshalb sie wirtschaftlich weniger interessant ist als die Rotbuche. Weshalb, no, how do I say that? Because of that, no. Weshalb, as, no, I don't know. For what reason, yeah. Or why, or for what reason, for that reason, I don't know. Sie, she, it. Wirtschaftlich, economically, we had that also in some previous episode where I said Wirt is in terms of, for example, Landwirtschaft, which means agriculture, and but it can also mean for example, Wirt in terms of like a host of something, either of, I don't know, like a hotel or a restaurant, but can also mean a host of a, for example, virus in your body. So, for example, your body would be in German Wirt, so the host. This is at least how we say it in German. And wirtschaftlich, so Wirtschaft, you could say host shiply or host shippingly, I don't know. So, but this just means economically. I mean, you could say, you can kind of see how this derives from Wirt and Schaft, which can also maybe, I don't know, I'm not sure about it, but I'm just guessing that it can also derive from the word schaffen. So, to create or to make something, like making, for example, a deadline. And, so rather in terms of getting to something, but schaffen, I don't know, like for example, anschaffen, so Geld, for example, anschaffen, acquire or buy, yeah, raise money, I don't know, something like that, but I'm just guessing, and yeah, it's just not too interesting for this matter of translating it, but or not too important to know why this is. This just means economically, and Wirtschaft with an uppercase W means economy, of course, or business, but rather economy. And weniger, less, interessant, interesting, is, als, than, the Rotbuche, European beach. So for the heavy and hard wood of the hornbeam exists no big market, for which reason she or it economically less interesting is than the European beech. So for the heavy and hard wood of the hornbeam exists no real market, for which reason it is less interesting economically than or economically speaking, than the European beech. Anwendung findet sie aber zum Beispiel im Werkzeugbau und als Brennholz. Anwendung, this I think in its core derives from the word wenden, which means to turn around. Anwenden means to, how do I say that, to use, to practice. Anwenden, apply, yeah. So Anwendung, application rather, findet, finds, sie, she or it, aber, but, though, zum Beispiel, zum, to the, zu dem, to the, Beispiel, example. So in English it's for example, in German it's to the example, basically. Im Werkzeugbau, in the Werkzeugbau, so Werkzeug derives from the word Werk, which means to a final, yeah, it can either mean factories, so where something is, you could say manufactured, or to be a completed, for example, work of art. But Werk, yeah, Werk, so rather work of art. There's also the word werken, I think. At least werken. Maybe this is rather to work, or like in terms of this factory rather meaning, rather. Or werken, which is rather in terms of smaller, I don't know what exactly tinkering means. Yeah, probably werken, of course, but I mean, I haven't heard that word so far in my life, I think. At least not too many times. But this means rather working on whatever, like electronics or wood in a much smaller scale, and yeah, that was it for Werkzeug. Derives from word as verb from the word zeugen, which means, yeah, this also it can mean witnesses. This is because this would mean witnesses. Zeugen, in this case, in what I mean is it means to produce, create, or procreate. For example, especially used in terms of the basically creation of a child. Zeugen, ein Kind zeugen, for example. This is where you use that word especially to father a child. And or to just create something, for example, Funken zeugen. Sparks produce or produce sparks. It's rather used, this is what I was also trying to say, but you can also say that, I think, but rather erzeugen is mostly used, which means to generate, to create, because zeugen in and of itself is not necessarily used too many times nowadays, and if it is used, it's probably more used in the other context which Google Translate gave us, which is to testify, like for example in court, of course. And also, as I said, the noun is Zeugen, which is witnesses, and the singular form is Zeuge. So, Werkzeug, so I think it's kind of, Bau, maybe let's first translate Bau, which derives from the word bauen, which means to build, create, construct. I think you get what I mean. And so, here we have work, or final piece of art, you could say, final product. Zeug, which means, in this case, Zeug, which is also important to mention, is that Zeug, in and of itself, Zeug, means stuff, basically. Mein Zeug, my stuff. For example, ich nehme mein Zeug mit, wenn ich ausziehe, would be an exemplary sentence in which this is, for example, used probably a lot of times, or for example, when you're angry because someone did something with your stuff, basically, like either lass mein Zeug in Ruhe, leave my stuff alone, or for example, was hast du mit meinem Zeug gemacht? What did you do with my stuff? Meinem hast. So, and or for example, when you, I don't know, see something which you don't know, don't recognize, like a chemical somewhere, I don't know, lying on the ground, which someone spilled, and you don't know, you might say in German, was ist das für ein Zeug? Or for example, was ist das für ein Chemiezeug? What kind of chemical stuff is that? But Zeug is rather, this is also important to mention, you could say colloquial, so rather slightly negatively impacted. You say impacted, but I think you get what I mean. Word. So Zeug is not necessarily the most how to say that, like high German sophisticated word you could use, but I think you get what I mean. So Werkzeugbau, this is what I was trying to say, because Werkzeug means the stuff you use to build something, to get to this work, or to work, basically. So you could say work, stuff, building, so the building of the stuff you work with, basically. Werkzeugbau. Und als Brennholz. And as brennen, which derives from the word brennen, to burn. Brennholz, burning wood, you could say. So I think, is there another word? Firewood, yeah. So, yeah. Anwendung, application finds she or it, but, although, for example, or to the example, in the building of working tools, I think, and as firewood. So it is mostly used, or it is often used, for example, in the building of working tools or tools in general, or as firewood. Nicht zu verachten ist ihre Eigenschaft als dienende Baumart. Nicht, not, to verachten. So, first of all, it has nothing to do with the number 8. I hope so, but I don't know, but I think so. Because achten in and of itself is to regard or respect something. Or, for example, ich achte darauf. I pay attention to that. I keep an eye on that. So, verachten is the opposite of that. And this is also going back to my point, which I made in so many episodes up until this point, that ver is always or mostly used in terms of talking about something where something is going wrong, not in the right direction. Here it's basically going in the opposite direction, so to not respect something or disrespect. So verachten is kind of to look at it with an eye of, you could say prejudge, I don't know, like judgmental eye, you could say. And nicht zu verachten, I think, disrespect, I don't know, despise, not to despise, disdain, scorn, all words I haven't heard before. Ist, ihre, her, Eigenschaft, which means ownship, not ownership. Eigenschaft, so characteristic, I think. Als, as, dienende, which means, I don't know, diener, derives from the word diener or dienen, serving. So, serving, Baumart, tree species. This derives from the word dienen, which means to serve, or the word diener is also diener. Servant is also a word which is connected to that. So, not to despise is its or her characteristic as serving tree species. So trägt die Hainbuche als prägende Baumart im Unterstand entscheidend zur Astreinigung der darüber liegenden Bäume und zur Bodenverbesserung bei. So, this way, trägt, carries, or trägt bei, because this is a separated verb, so beitragen is the original verb, which is just means contribute or to help. So die Hainbuche, the hornbeam, as prägende. We had that also in some episode where I pulled up a picture, I think. Prägen, which means to imprint, shape, emboss, emboss, like with a metal or something, stamping into something until there are like the lines or whatever you want to stamp into, or rather emboss. It's embossed. And prägend, so this means very characterizing, very much having an impact. Prägende Baumart, tree species, in the Unterstand, understand, you could say, stehen, stand, not understand in English, where you say I understand, I comprehend, but Unterstand means understand, like very much literally, standing under something. Entscheidend, decidingly, this derives from the word scheiden, which means to either divorce or to, like in general divorce, but it derives from the meaning of separating something into two or more pieces. And for example, there's this kind of phrase, von uns scheiden, when someone is parting ways or dying, basically. And from us in this case, rhetorically. And entscheidend, decidingly. Entscheiden means decide, basically. So entscheidend, decidingly. To the. Ast, which means what was it again? Branch, I believe. Yeah, branch or limb. Astreinigung. That's derived from the word reinigen, which means cleaning. Yeah, or cleanse. So the cleaning of the branches der darüber liegenden Bäume und zur Bodenverbesserung bei. Der of the darüber, above, liegenden. So lying, you could say, even though they're of course not lying, but this is, in this case, darüber liegend is like liegend is always a, how do you say, locative? Do you say locative? I don't know. Locative. Preposition, not preposition. Like, it just says lying above. Yeah, I think, why do I even explain it? It's the same in English, I think. So, yeah. Just not lying. Und zur Bodenverbesserung bei. The good thing about liegend, by the way, if anyone's interested in linguistics, is because in English there's of course this double meaning with lying and lying, at least, what's it called, phonetically. But here we don't have that problem because liegen and lügen, which would mean the other lie, liegen is not the same as lügen, lügen, whereas in English it's lie and lie. So, and darüber liegenden Bäume, above lying trees, and zur, to the Bodenverbesserung. I think we also had that in some previous article. So ground or soil, Verbesserung, verbessern means to improve. Can you say to better something? But basically to make something better. So to improve. Bodenverbesserung, so the bettering, you could say, of the soil, making better, so the improve, what's it called? Improve, I don't know, Verbesserung. Improvement, yeah, of course. So the soil improvement, beitragen, contribute. So trägt die Hainbuche als prägende Baumart im Unterstand entscheidend zur Astreinigung der darüber liegenden Bäume und zur Bodenverbesserung bei. So contributes the hornbeam as a characterizing tree species in the, I don't know, Unterstand? Shelter, yeah, you could rather say shelter. Or underlying tree, like what's it called? Tree, Schicht. Tree layers. I think you get what I mean. But in the shelter, and decidingly to the branch cleanse or cleaning of the above lying trees and to the ground or soil, I don't know, getting better. Soil improvement, of course, soil improvement. So contributes this way the hornbeam contributes as a very characterizing tree species in the shelter of the lying above trees to the cleaning of the branches of the above lying trees and to the improvement of the soil. So that was it for today with this article. I hope you liked it. I hope that wasn't too long, not too much explanation, but you can always say if you don't like something, or of course also if you like something, just write it in the comments and I'm trying to improve that. And yeah, that was it for today. Leave a like, leave a comment if you want to, subscribe, and see you in the next episode.